For over 50 years, the story stayed the same. Audie Murphy, America's most decorated war hero, died in a tragic plane crash over the mountains of Virginia. A terrible accident. Nothing more, or so we thought. But new evidence has surfaced, and it changes everything. Behind the official reports lies a trail of strange details, unanswered questions, and whispers of foul play. And now, after decades of silence, investigators believe they've uncovered the real story. What they found isn't just troubling, it's dark. Because Audie Murphy may not have just been lost to tragedy, he may have been silenced. Long before the medals, the movies, or the mystery, Audie Murphy was just a dirt-poor farm boy from Texas. Born in 1925, the seventh of 12 children, he grew up in the middle of the Great Depression with barely enough food to survive. His father walked out when he was still a child. His mother passed away when he was just 16. With no parents, no money, and only a fifth-grade education, Murphy quit school and took whatever jobs he could to keep his siblings fed. These early years were brutal, filled with loss, hunger, and hardship, but they forged a quiet toughness in him that would later stun the world. Because no one could have guessed that this undersized teenager, barely 5'5" and 110 pounds, would one day become the most celebrated soldier of his generation. When Murphy tried to enlist, even the military didn't think he had what it took. The Navy turned him down. The Marines said he was too small. But the Army gave him a shot, and that decision would change history. Sent into the chaos of World War II, Murphy proved almost immediately that size meant nothing. He fought across North Africa, Italy, France, and Germany, earning a reputation for fearless, almost reckless bravery. At just 19, he performed one of the most legendary acts of the war, climbing onto a burning tank destroyer and single-handedly holding off dozens of German troops for over an hour, all while wounded. That moment earned him the Medal of Honor, but it was only one of 33 awards he'd collect before the war was over. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a symbol, a living legend. But the war didn't leave him unscarred, and what came next would be a different kind of battle entirely. When Murphy came home, the parades and fanfare couldn't hide what was really going on. He may have looked like a national hero, but inside, he was still at war. Nightmares, flashbacks, sudden rages, what they called battle fatigue back then, we now know as PTSD. And instead of hiding it, Murphy did something almost unheard of at the time. He spoke out. He used his fame to push for better treatment for veterans, even while quietly battling his own demons. Meanwhile, Hollywood came calling. Over the years, he starred in more than 40 films, often playing stoic, gun-slinging heroes in westerns and war dramas. His biggest hit, To Hell and Back, a movie where he played himself, reliving the trauma for millions on screen. But even as the cameras rolled, Murphy stayed guarded. The pain was never far behind, and his success never quite erased the shadows. While the public saw Murphy as a Hollywood star and war hero, there were parts of his life that didn't make headlines. Behind the scenes, he built unusual connections with military producers, foreign filmmakers, and even government-backed media projects. He starred in propaganda-style TV specials for the Army, traveled internationally for obscure film shoots, and worked with figures deeply embedded in both Hollywood and Washington. Some of his collaborations raised eyebrows: quiet partnerships, classified trips, and a strange habit of drifting toward military-adjacent roles, even long after his service had ended. It didn't seem suspicious at first, but in hindsight, some believe Murphy may have stumbled into circles that blurred the line between entertainment and intelligence. And if that's true, it could help explain what happened next. On May 28, 1971, Audie Murphy boarded a small twin-engine plane headed across the mountains of Virginia, and never made it out. The aircraft slammed into Brush Mountain in poor weather, killing everyone on board. The official report blamed pilot error and low visibility. Case closed, or so it seemed. But almost immediately, questions began to surface. Why was the plane flying so low over dangerous terrain? Why were parts of the wreckage never recovered? And why did the pilot, an experienced flyer, ignore basic safety protocols that day? For a while, those questions were buried beneath the weight of national grief. A tragic accident was easier to accept than the alternative. But not everyone believed the story. And for those who looked closer, the cracks were already showing. As time passed, more strange details began to surface. details that didn't fit the narrative of a simple crash. Witnesses reported the plane flying erratically before it vanished from radar. Investigators noted that the pilot chose a dangerously low flight path through fog-covered mountains, despite safer routes being available. Even more unsettling, key components from the crash, parts of the control system, fragments from the cockpit, were never recovered, or were said to be missing entirely. Rumors started swirling behind closed doors, that Murphy had been acting paranoid in the weeks leading up to the crash, that he believed he was being watched. And then there were the whispers, quiet, persistent whispers, that someone had wanted him silenced. At first, these claims sounded like the stuff of conspiracy. But decades later, when a new investigation reopened the case, those whispers started to sound a lot more like warnings. It took more than 50 years, but eventually, the silence cracked. A group of independent investigators, using modern forensic tools and declassified government documents, decided to take a second look at the crash that killed Audie Murphy. What they found was disturbing. Among the wreckage, they identified tampered wiring, cut and rerouted in ways that didn't align with a simple mechanical failure. Control systems that should have kept the plane stable appeared to have been deliberately compromised. Even more chilling, a retired government official came forward, claiming Murphy had recently uncovered sensitive information tied to covert operations, information that made him a liability. According to the whistleblower, Murphy was being watched in the months before his death, monitored, shadowed, and when he got too close to something he shouldn't have seen, the order was quietly given to make sure he never talked. His death, they said, wasn't an accident, it was a message. For Murphy's family, the revelations hit like a second tragedy. For decades, they'd lived with unanswered questions, grieving a man whose legacy was sealed in medals and movie reels, but whose final moments never quite made sense. Now, with evidence pointing toward deliberate sabotage, they're demanding answers. Publicly, loudly. And they're not alone. Historians are re-examining Murphy's life, not just as a soldier or a star, but as a man caught in the crosshairs of something much larger. A man who may have been targeted, not by enemies on a battlefield, but by forces within his own country. His story, once seen as a symbol of American courage, now carries a shadow of betrayal. And the deeper you dig, the more it becomes clear, Audie Murphy didn't just die. He was erased. For years, we believed Audie Murphy's story ended with a tragic crash in the mountains. But now, that ending feels more like a cover. What began as a tale of bravery and survival has morphed into something darker, a web of secrets, silence, and betrayal. If the most decorated soldier in American history could be silenced, what does that say about the forces working behind the scenes? And how many other stories, buried under official reports and forgotten headlines, are still waiting to be uncovered? The mystery of Audie Murphy may be solved, but the truth it reveals is far more unsettling. Because sometimes, the real war begins after the battlefield.